Ready to go. Right, councillors, can I ask you to be seated, please?
Hello, Rachel.
Jesus. Right, good morning councillors and welcome to this special meeting of the Nelson City Council. Can I please ask you to stand for the opening prayer?
Almighty God, sovereign in all things, bless this city and its people. Guide us in local government each day that our decisions may be wise and just and magnify your holy name. Amen.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies? No apologies, thank you. The Mayor is joining us any minute for the meeting. She's online. Good morning.
Good morning.
Is it raining over there?
Beautiful sunny day.
Right, I must admit that your grandson is quite the chap, isn't he?
He's beautiful.
Right. No apologies. Confirmation of order of business. There's a change to the order today, and I'm going to move the following: that the council agrees that report R9876, confirmation of contribution to the Waimea Dam, and the decision be released from public excluded business. Do I have a second though? Councillor Richards, thank you. All those in favour? Ayes have it. Thank you. Sir.
I just want to ask a question on the, is that how it works? Because in the past we've been told that it's the chief executive's decision whether or not things come in or out of public excluded when we wish to have a vote. So can I just understand whether this is a decision of the chief executive to take it out of public excluded, or whether or not in fact the decision rests with us, that we can decide when stuff goes in and out of public excluded? Because this seems like a moment in time where we've made a decision to take things out of public excluded when previously we've been declined the opportunity to vote in similar circumstances.
Yep.
So our recommendation was to put it in public excluded, particularly if you wanted to discuss anything to do with the negotiation that had happened with Tasman District Council. But that was the main driver for that. But at the end of the day, we've checked with TDC. There's nothing in the report that they're uncomfortable with being in the public arena. So I have no concerns with the decision not to keep it in public, unless councillors start asking questions about those negotiations, in which case we may have to go back into public excluded.
Question through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, but just in terms of, I'm more interested in the precedent value of what's happened just now, because it's the first time I've seen us vote something not to go into public excluded against the recommendation of the chief executive. So am I right that we are, just for my own benefit in the future, it's just a question of putting up a vote to actually not include it in public excluded?
Yeah,
okay, great.
It's a recommendation, like all recommendations. But I was approached about this about at least 2 days ago, when we've had time to think about it. We have had a chance to run off copies of the report so people could see it. There will be other times when I would speak strongly against taking something out of public excluded because staff wouldn't be able to speak.
Okay, happy with that? Thank you very much. Okay, interests, if you've got any interests, please declare them, and updates to the register, and identify any conflicts of interest in the agenda. Public forum today, Mr. Steve Cross, Nelson Residents Association. He wants to talk about urban water supply. Mr. Cross, please take a seat and join us. You have 5 minutes, and we look forward to hearing from you. Oh, yes, you can, for the organisation. You can have 10. We'll listen intently.
So, firstly, I'd like to congratulate you all for making this an open meeting rather than public excluded. So when I look at this paper, I can't see any reason why you would have ever contemplated having it in public excluded. But anyway, I don't have too many problems with the recommendations. Well, I do. I don't really think we should be giving $5 million. But One thing I'd like to draw attention to is the engineering services agreement, which is yet to be negotiated. So you might remember, originally when this whole thing came up about the contribution to the dam, we were told one of the reasons for doing this was to save, giving $5 million would save $3 million on expenditure on a pipeline to supply Alliance and NZA, the Nelson South customers. Now, that analysis failed to recognise that in supplying those customers you'd actually earn revenue, and the revenue is probably about $1 million. So who wouldn't spend $3 million to earn revenue? And I'm just really disappointed that the staff here don't see that as an opportunity. They made it a problem rather than an opportunity. And if one thing we need is we've got underutilised water assets here, we should be busting a gut to actually supply those customers. They're in our area. I don't know why Tasman ever got in there to start with, but the engineering services agreement contemplates that those ones will continue to be supplied by Tasman. You should be looking at taking those back and bringing them onto the Nelson system and earning revenue for the benefit of all Nelson ratepayers. So if that services agreement goes ahead as possible, those customers will be paying more than other industries are in Nelson for their water. The first thing they'll do is start screaming about that. They'll probably want you to average it across every user in Nelson. So in fact, every water user in Nelson will end up paying more so that Tasman can supply customers in our area. So I think that's one area that needs to be looked at long and hard. And I don't see any problem about spending $3 million to make the money. So the other thing I want to raise, and it's a long-standing issue I've had in a beef, is concerns the water demand forecast that has been used in all the analysis that's been presented around this issue. And they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, instead of a picture, we've had 10,000 words and still don't know what that demand forecast is. I've asked and asked, all I've had is obfuscation, the big smog of misinformation and cloud. Everything you've done when it comes to doing planning, you always have these forecasts. So you look at, if it's looking at population, you have a graph, simple graph that shows what the historic population's been, what the projection is, and that's what you're basing your plan on. Same when it comes to looking at Southern Link. It's like, what's the historic traffic volume been, what's the projection going forward? Well, why aren't you doing that with water? Why isn't there one simple graph that shows what historic water demand has been in Nelson, what the projection is being used in modelling, and particularly in the drought security report, which is the fundamental building block on all the decisions you've been making about this Waimea Dam? Why isn't there a single graph showing that? And I'll tell you why there isn't, because as soon as you saw it, it would show what a rigged up, jacked up forecast it was, because it would look absurd. And as an example of that, our January mean demand in January is around 21,000 cubic metres a day at the moment. And I've managed finally to extract, and after much probing and digging, what the drought security report assumes in 10 years' time, which is 32,800 cubic metres a day. That's over a 50% increase in 10 years at a time when the population's only increasing by 10%. Now, that is a ridiculous demand forecast. Anyone who looked at it would say it's ridiculous. And the implications of that are, because we're not taking a regional view on urban water supply. So we have lots of capacity. Ratepayers in Nelson are paying some of the highest water rates in the country because we built all that capacity. It's sitting there idle. Now we're going to see a duplication across the boundary, which ratepayers there are going to pay dearly for. And this is the worst of local government, when we don't get that cooperation, we don't get good information to compare what plan it. And I've asked a number of questions about this, and there's never been a satisfactory answer. Tasman's never approached us about cooperation. There's never been any initiative from here about cooperating. There's never been any analysis about what sort of costs might be involved in supplying Richmond with Nelson water, or what revenue you might get out of it. Never been done. And I think that's appalling when we should be taking a regional approach and looking at it. And but I hope one of you around this table today is going to ask for the fundamental graph of water demand forecast for Nelson. You won't find it in the asset management plan, you won't find it anywhere. And it is like a basic building block for any analysis. And I know Councillor Laurie asked for this some months ago, never got it. And I'm going to make a prediction, you won't get it. You won't get it because it will show what a shonky analysis that drought security report was. And if you look at it, you will find that we have tons of capacity we could supply all of Richmond just on the inflated, hyped up forecast. So I was really angry when I found out that the CEO here went out to a closed meeting at TDC on the 6th of September. It seems like whatever he said in that meeting, no one knows because it was closed. No notes, no written materials, all oral. Really poor process.
Mr. Cross, I'll interrupt you. Would you please just temper your comments regarding the staff?
Okay.
Thank you.
So, whatever happened there, Dana Wensley came out and said, I mean, it was outrageous. She said she was really worried about whether there'd be water for bathing of babies. I mean, what was said? But, but when I asked, I made a Lagoima request here, what was said at that meeting and what was the basis of the analysis, it came back to the drought security report. Well, that drought security report is just rubbish. It is, so I would like to see made public the demand forecast that was behind that drought security report so we can all see it, because I can't get answers on that. I cannot get answers. It has been hidden and it is fundamental to any consideration about water supply. You know, that is the most basic thing, just like population forecasts, just like traffic counts. It is fundamental to when you look at a plan for water for the area. So please get it out, publish it. It could be produced in half an hour. The data must be sitting on someone's computer. It doesn't take long to produce a graph.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you. Any quick questions for Mr. Cross? If not, thank
Mr. Deputy Mayor, it's me here. Could I just ask Mr. Cross a quick question? Thank you. Mr. Cross, could you just remind me, did you submit and speak in support or opposition to Tasman District Council in relation to the Waimea Dam proposal?
I've been consistently against it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve, and I welcome you to your involvement in Tahuna Beach. I think that's really good, so we'll be seeing a bit more of you, hopefully, when you tell us how you're all trotting along, which is great.
Got to be elected first.
Oh, I think tom-toms are sounding okay. Right, thank you. Councillor Fulton.
Thank you, through the chair. Thanks for coming in again, Stephen. I know you've submitted on this issue a lot and some of us agree with your sentiments. At this stage of the process though, what do you suggest we do?
Well, I don't know if you can ask Mr. Cross that question because we haven't even given the paper in front of us any consideration, Councillor.
Well, he's obviously seen it, so I'm curious what his viewpoint is.
I think Mr. Cross has answered that.
Yeah.
No.
No, not what we could do.
Well, in my judgment call, you were asked a moment ago if you submitted, what was your position on the dam? Contribution of the dam, and you said you're against it, that's fine.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's still some water to flow under the bridge there's a meeting on Friday, obviously, at TDC, which is going to be critical. But regardless of that, the issue I'm raising raises greater concerns, and that is about quality of information that you've been given to make decisions on. Now, it's probably too late to turn that back, but I think that it's incredibly important on these sort of things in future that you get given quality information from your professional and highly paid staff.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much. Right, we will move on to item number 5, recommendations from committees. We've got one here in front of us, 5.1.1. Who's going to speak to that?
They just moved, isn't it?
Just been moved?
I'd like to move that is approved. The background to that, Mr Chair, is that there's some work that needs to be done on the Stoke Library. It's one of those things that's been located, there's an issue there and it needs to be fixed, and this is what that recommendation is for.
Seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Ayes have it. Thank you. Right, we head into the discussion now on confirmation of contribution to the Waimea Dam. And I'll ask the Chief Executive to introduce this. Or you're going to hand it to Ms Harrison. Welcome to the table.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Chair. As the paper outlines, TDC are looking for, they need confirmation of our funding before their meeting on the 30th of November to allow the project to proceed. The resolutions that I've brought to you are broadly in line with what was resolved in May, which is covered in section 4.1 of the report. So basically at that point in time, our council said that they would like the opportunity to become a shareholder. So what I've brought back to you is effectively a negotiated position with TDC around becoming a shareholder after 10 years. And then obviously we've, through discussions, said that we wanted an ability to have some influence over the directors, and so there's a joint appointment there, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Through you, I'm interested that the Tasman District Council floated the idea of Nelson City giving the dam more money, and through the Chair, I'm just wondering, did TDC indicate how much more money they would like? And did they say anything about the impact of us not providing more money?
Through the Chair, there wasn't any discussion about an amount. It was really just that they wanted a recognition that there was, obviously there'd been an increase in the dam cost from the point in time that we'd made a decision around our contribution. But as you recall, our decision was around an economic development contribution as opposed to a water.
Through the Chair, the second part of my question was, did they give any indications to what might happen if we didn't provide extra funding?
Through the Chair, no.
Okay. Through the Chair, my next question is...
how many have you got, man?
Just last one.
Right.
Yeah, thanks. So we were told earlier in this process that the dam would be built regardless of whether or not Nelson City Council put money into it. Is that still the case?
Can I have it? Yep. So I need to just correct Ms Harrison's answer. So I've had discussions with TDC officials about increased contribution. A number of $6.5 million was mentioned. And then a lower demand figure of 18,000 cubic metres was floated as well. In terms of will the dam proceed without our $5 million, I don't know how tight their budgets are, but I think our $5 million is probably more important now than it was 2 or 3 months ago. That's my feeling.
Thank you very much, through the Chair. Really appreciate that clarification. Just going back to that second part of the question again, was there any indication from the TDC as to what might happen or what the impact might be on the dam if we didn't come up with the extra 1.5 million?
They were more concerned about securing the 5 million.
Through the Chair, they were more concerned, doesn't mean that they didn't express some concerns about the impact of us not giving them $1.5 million extra. Can you be a little bit more clear on that, please?
Probably not in a public meeting, no. I mean, this is the problem. There is information that I'm happy to provide in public excluded that I'm not prepared to talk about in public.
That's fair.
Through the Chair, why not?
No, Matt, you've had a fair shot. Councillor Fulton.
Yes, thank you, through the Chair. So my question is around then, presumably this meeting's been called because TDC has either been seeking a higher amount of money or a lower number of cubic metres, having heard your answers to Matt's questions. Why is this recommendation required if there's already a recommendation saying exactly the same thing on 15th of May 2018?
So through the Chair, I'm happy to answer that. So in 4.1, the recommendation...
Mr. Chairman, for clarification, it's now 3.1, got a new report.
Oh, sorry.
You used 4.1 earlier. We're talking about 3.1.
Sorry, through the Chair. In 3.1, when the Council resolved to make the contribution in May, there was wording that effectively said that we allocated funding in year 3 of the long-term plan, and it was subject to a contract coming back confirming some of those terms. So I suppose so TDC were looking for more surety before they proceeded. They're effectively reaching financial close from their perspective, and they were just wanting more surety. And obviously we said that we wanted an ability to have a shareholding, and this is what we've brought back is slightly different to that because it's got that 10-year limit on the shareholding.
Thank you. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, through you to Officer Harrison. I need clarity here in respect of the letter that's going from the CE. Has it already gone, or is it still to be delivered to them?
Through the Chair, no, it hasn't gone. That's subject to this meeting.
You're absolutely sure of that, eh?
Absolutely.
Right. So my information from my sources tell me that, yes, oh well, we'll accept that.
Thank you.
Follow on there. We were asked as councillors to contribute our thoughts, our ideas as to the conditions around this 5 million, conditions that we would put in this letter to go with, to go to the Tasman District Council. And what mine was that I wanted some provision in there if it was sold, if it was ever sold, that we had ourselves covered and we had some control over that. Do you see in this here from 4 onwards through that my request has been satisfied? I'm not sure that it has been, and I just...
Through the Chair, I'm not aware that that request was ever resolved by Council.
We were asked at a meeting, a workshop, or probably a workshop, confidential workshop, to contribute our thoughts in respect of what conditions should go on the offer to the Tasman District Council. And my contribution was that I felt strongly that if it ever came to the point where it was sold, we should have built in, as one of the conditions, that we have some interest and control over that.
Sorry. Chief Executive.
So, by having a shareholding, that would protect our interest. I mean, if the dam was going to be sold, it would be the shares in the dam that were being sold. I would think that would give us the ability to as much as we can, protect our interest.
That's if we take it up, the shareholding, we're not.
Well, the option's going to be there.
Yes.
Yes. But that'll be a decision for future councils, but the ability is there for the council to protect its interest.
So it won't be lost in the first 10 years or anything like that, that option? No.
I don't think so, no. I can't forecast what will happen in the next 10 years, but I'd be very surprised if they sell that dam within the next 10 years, that's for sure. There's still all the Crown funding and all the, and I don't know the details of it, but I'd be very surprised if all that Crown funding has gone in and it can then be sold as a private operation in the first 10 years.
Councillor Delby.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. 4.4 of the new meeting notes. On there it says that getting the infrastructure to get the water from the aquifers to Nelson City Council, 15 to 18 million would be required. Notes the council would also need to contribute to this upgraded cost. My question would be, is that an amount in dollars, or do we know some sort of percentage? Let's assume it's 18 million. What is Nelson City Council obliged to find?
Do you want a hard copy?
No. So, I mean, the drought security work we did showed that we don't need this water for a very, very, very long time. And so that's why the main recommendation was that this was an economic development investment, but provided a long backstop for the council's water supply. So the options would be at the time, if the council did want to take water, to either put down its own bore into the Waimea Aquifer and then treat the water and pump it back into Nelson City Council's system, or if TDC was investing in infrastructure around about that time, it may be more economical to do that together. But I wouldn't know what percentage of TDC's infrastructure that was until we knew what it was they were going to build. Ideally, something like that you'd probably want to signal 10 or 20 years out so that TDC knew our plans and we could work together.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, it's my understanding of all the data we've been given, their infrastructure won't carry that full 22,000 cubic metres anyway. It will carry something less. And so you are right, we might not need the full amount, but that said, they'll have to upgrade if we go to they'll have to upgrade their own infrastructure if we go for that full amount, let's call it 20 years or whatever. But have we locked in what is the percentage we would be obliged to pay?
No, because I'm not convinced that we would necessarily use their infrastructure. It's so far out that we just don't know what Nelson and Richmond will look like. But logically, you would think that if TDC was starting to invest or replace a major main that ran from the Waimea bore fields towards Nelson City Council boundaries, any time after about year 40, that we would say, hey, we would like some extra water, now's the time for us to invest. But then you'd then also have the fact that you've invested probably 10, 20 years too early, and would it be cheaper to wait and just do it ourselves nearer the time? So that's why there is no specificity about that, because it's just so far away. No one has any idea what water supply situations will look like. We were just trying to provide as much flexibility as possible. But one of the things we are saying to TDC is there is no commitment to buy that water through TDC reticulation.
Come to that. Second question through you, Mr. Chair. On the shareholding, 4.6, right to convert the grant to shares, does it actually say, do we know how many shares we get, or a percentage of the shareholding? Do we know that?
Ms. Harrison?
So through it would be proportionate to the 5 million over, over the cost of the dam, really. So it would probably be about 5%.
Cool. Good on, thank you. And just one further through you, Mr. Chair. The 4.8 in the appointment of a director to the Waimea Dam Board, if we did convert it, the grant to shares and then you get a share allocation, do we actually know what the criteria for the director appointment is? Is it going to be an external director, or are we going to appoint a councillor, which TDC tend to be doing?
Nikki?
Through the chair, I think my understanding is there'll be a mix of external and councillor. Oh, sorry. There will be a mix of directors on that board, both external and potentially internal, and we would be looking for our appointment to be one of the external members.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, then Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern is one of terminology. If we look at the white document just received this morning and bullet point 4, Nelson City Council or its successor will have ongoing rights to access 22,000 cube from the Waimea Aquifer. I would like to see an additional couple of words in there which says something along the lines of, or any dam reticulation. Because if this thing doesn't work and the recharging of the aquifer doesn't occur, at some stage in the future they may well be faced with having to pipe that dam water into a reticulation system. And I believe that we want to cover ourselves in case that happens. We're talking a long way ahead, but it wouldn't be nice in the future to look back and say, no, you only asked for water out of the aquifer and we can no longer provide that. So it may be being a little bit overcautious, but I believe that we could cover ourselves by just saying from the Waimea Aquifer or any dam reticulation.
So at the moment, and look, this is my understanding is, but the fact that that dam water will be released into the Waimea River and will recharge the aquifers is a linchpin of this whole proposal. So I'd be absolutely stunned if that didn't work. But the fact is we're only contributing to the dam. If there was going to be then a subsequent investment in reticulation, that again would be massive amounts of money, and we wouldn't, and that would have to be a separate negotiation again.
But these things can happen. They have happened, and I'm just thinking that for the want of a few choice words added in, we cover ourselves for a possible eventuality. Let's all hope it doesn't occur. But I'd hate to think on a technicality in 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time that we, by overlooking that point, have left ourselves at risk.
So I think Tasman District Council would see that two ways. One is that would then give us the ability to just hook into their existing reticulation and would take a dim view on that. And secondly, that if there was reticulation that had to be laid from the dam itself, it would be tens of millions of dollars and we wouldn't get a free ride on that. I suspect if we tried to add those words on, that could be a deal breaker.
Okay, my conscience is clear, I've raised it.
Right, Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just quickly clarifying, so what we're after here is a letter basically saying exactly what we've already passed back in May, but clarifying that timeline of 10 years for the grant to be converted to shareholding. Is that correct?
Through the chair, there is that point, but also too, we are declining to increase our contribution or reduce our volume. So there are some additional clauses here, as you can see, compared to what we passed back in May.
Okay, just so clarifying, the resolution we passed obviously is still valid from the May 2018, so I'm not sure why we should be changing that, but it's just basically the same letter. It's basically a letter we would have sent them anyway, regardless of whether their decision prior to the increase, unfortunate cost increase. It's just that date basically, there's nothing else I'm missing here, because it just seems a wee bit bizarre that they're requiring a letter pretty much saying what we've already told them and we've already signed. So, and then they come a bit cheeky coming back and saying, well, thank you, you've given me some, can you give a little bit more? It's like the kid asked for another.
Well, the world loves a try, don't they? I mean, But we are confirming our position, and they have a crunch meeting, I think, on Friday.
Would it be right that they should still be comfortable even if we didn't write another letter, apart from turning down their second request, we'd still be in a safe spot, and they'd still be in a safe spot? Is that correct in my assumption? Yep. I'm basically putting it out there that we don't need to send this letter out, maybe not.
Okay, Councillor Ackland, then McGurk.
Can I just comment on that?
Oh, hang on a sec.
Reply would be good, thank you.
So, the wording at the moment is that it's subject to the council approving an agreement. So that's what we're trying to do is, on Friday, Tasman District Council has to decide whether they're going to sign on the dotted line. And if our money is not committed, if we haven't basically said, yes, we accept these key terms, and if a contract, we will sign a contract on these key terms so we know we have made a commitment. At the moment, it's an allocation subject to. And so if TDC signs on the dotted line on Friday, and we haven't made that commitment, then they have to carry the risk that this council could change its mind, which exposes them to $5 million more risk. So if you don't pass those resolutions today, then that'll be the consequence for TDC on Friday.
Okay, so just quick clarification, I think, Mr. Deputy, we'd already signed it off, I felt. This is a further clarification. What you're saying, it was subject to, a bit like buying a house, subject to legal advice or subject to finance being available?
Yes, so basically what this is doing is confirming that if an agreement is put up with those conditions, then the subject to has been met, and we're confirming our position.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ackland and McGurk.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'm on the same page as Councillor Skinner. I can't quite identify what the change is. So I've heard what you said, Mr. Chief Executive. Can I approach it in a slightly different way? Is that it's earmarked in the long-term plan for 2021, I think, or 1920?
Yep.
Around there?
Yep, 2021.
So a future council could resolve to not do that action because we haven't actually given that money across. So there's no legal binding, am I right? I mean, there's no legally binding agreement in place by this resolution.
I think if I write a letter authorised by, so what we're envisaging is that the council passes this resolution today, and then we would write a letter saying that we are committed to a contract that's got these terms in it. I suspect from other legal advice that could well commit us. I suspect it would commit us. At the moment, the word is allocate. The language we're using here is stronger.
Sorry, just say it again. Allocate.
The current resolution is allocate. It says allocate $5 million in.
Yeah.
And so the wording in these resolutions is much stronger, and that's the intention. So in effect, we would be binding future councils.
Well,
have you got another question?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. But I mean, these are quite important issues.
Well, you can bring that up when we go to debate. But
no, because I think I need staff input because they're the experts, Mr. Chair. I don't need to hear from, with greatest respect to my colleagues, I don't need to hear about a debate with different opinion. I want to have the advice.
I'll ask the questions.
Well, thanks. Just give me a second.
Yep.
Is that one of the I've got two parts that I want to deal with. This is the first part of my questioning is on actually what we're doing today with an extraordinary meeting, and the second part of my questions is just to work out what's happening in terms of investment or grant, which is the way that it's been characterised as payment. But just dealing with the first aspect first. I'm with Councillor Skinner still, and I still can't quite understand by giving a promise to do something in terms of what TDC is apparently asking us to do, which is to confirm, have it all signed off, I can't find the exact words, that its contractual arrangements are in place in order to make its unqualified decision to fund the project by 30 November 2018. Well, I say they don't have that by us confirming a promise to do something in the future that's subject to a resolution of council that could change it. Can you give me any more advice than what you've already given? You're saying they could sue us, is what you're saying.
So through the Chair, the Council enters into all sorts of long-term contractual arrangements that are legally binding, and this would be contractually legally binding, this letter from the Chief Executive.
So the contractually legally binding thing is to provide some funding in the future in that year. Is that what you're saying?
On that date, on the 1st of July, if the dam project goes ahead, on the 1st of July of 2020, we will pay across $5 million in return for these conditions.
Having the option to have a shareholding, and that's helpful. So thanks. So this is actually forming a contract, is what we're being asked to do today. We're actually being asked to form a legally binding agreement to fund. And can I just understand the term of that contract then, please, which is the second aspect of investment versus grant, is that we have an option under the proposed agreement, contract today, to have a future option on a shareholding. Is that right?
Yes, through the chair after 10 years. So when we passed the resolution in May, the council was of the mind that they would like that option to be a shareholder in the future, and this is clarifying that we wouldn't take that shareholding in the first 10 years, and that we would also at that point have the ability to jointly appoint a director with TDC.
Okay, I mean the concern I had, just to give you the context of my question, is the concern I had is that we were painting ourselves into a corner into that being the option that we have to take. But as I understand, it's simply an option, so it's keeping the status quo available, or maintaining our status quo to make that decision in the future. And in particular, the investment route, route, if you're American, had the potential to carry a contingent expectation on us to fund ongoing costs for a shareholder, which is something that I've always been against, particularly, and given that this has always been couched as a grant for economic purposes rather than it being an investment vehicle. So that's good, I'm happy with that. And just my question on that final term is that you don't consider that to be an agreement to agree. You're just saying that is a contractually binding option rather than it being an agreement to agree, an aspect of a binding agreement.
So through the chair, if we were to go down the path of a shareholding in the future, it is certainly an option, and we would undertake due diligence at that point in time when we make that decision. So that would be a decision that would come back to the council of the day to undertake whether we wanted to take that shareholding and the terms of the agreements that we would be entering into to become a shareholder.
Okay. Councillor McGirt.
Yeah, one question, thanks. Probably directed more to the Chief Executive. Much has happened since this resolution in May of this year. I'm just wondering, does the content of the report and the recommendations take into account the scope and timeline of the Cabinet paper on the Three Waters review?
So that Cabinet paper talked about a series of things. The first is regulation of water supply and possibly environmental regulation at 2. Then there was going to be a discussion about service delivery arrangements, which would be late 2019. And then also a discussion about possibility of economic regulation. This was discussed. I was at the Rural and Provincial Sector meeting on Thursday and Friday of last week, where this was the topic. The government are still saying that there'll be no forced amalgamations, no forced aggregations. And they want to have more conversation on that. So it is going to be an option that's still going to be discussed, but they're talking about incentives and things like that. So no, I don't think this changes what we're discussing today.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm interested in a bit more detail around the share options and the percentage that we would be getting. So, first question is the portion, about 40% that central government's putting into this project, does that give the central government share rights?
So through the chair, that would be, that's not information that I have to hand, that's confidential and held by Tasman District Council.
Okay, because I guess my question is, if we assumed that central government's money was a handover, here you go, here's the money, go build it, and that was the end of it from their point of view, then I think the percentage split of the shareholding should remove central government's contribution from the total amount. So we should be 5% of 60 mil as opposed to 5% of 100 mil. Well, no, sorry, not 5%, but 5 million out of 60, not 5 million out of 100. Because the central government's money is as much all of our money as it is TDC's money.
Some of it is loans. It's not all grants. We will get a shareholding based on the volume of water we take is our expectation. And as Ms Harrison has indicated, that'll be something the council will have to decide, because as soon as if we choose to take a shareholding, then there will be operations and maintenance costs associated with that, which won't be inconsiderable. So it won't be a decision taken lightly by a future council, and we would probably only want a shareholding in an exact proportion to the amount of water we want to take.
Sorry, that advice is different to the advice we just received, which would be we'd get 5% of the shareholding, which is different to the volume of water, which would be up to 22. Aren't they two different things?
No, the shareholding would be in proportion to how much we wanted to, would be up to the maximum, would be limited by our water take. Yeah, that we could take to the maximum, which we think is about 5 or 6%. But in terms of your questions about the Crown, no, we haven't put our mind to that.
So our potential future shareholding has nothing to do with $5 million, or how much $5 million is out of the total project cost.
The $5 million is a grant at the moment, but we have the ability to turn it into an investment that gives us access to 22,000 cubic metres of water. And we can take a shareholding that would reflect that 22,000 cubic metres, or a lesser shareholding if it turned out we didn't want or need that much water and didn't want or need to incur a larger portion of the operating costs of the dam.
And so that ability to take that shareholding is automatic and at our discretion. There'd be no further payment required, or up to 22,000 cumecs worth of the shareholding.
Correct.
That's automatic. We can take it whenever we want.
After 10 years.
After 10 years, yes.
Okay. Can I just? Okay. And I may have overstated the government's position when I said that compulsory aggregation is not on the table. I think that there has been a very strong reaction from the local government sector, and they're thinking about it, but I think I may have overstated the case when I said it's not on the table, that compulsory aggregation is not on the table. We'll know more about that late in 2019.
Thank you. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Through you to Nikki. Officer Harrison, when is it proposed that we send this letter?
So through the chair, the intention was that we would send it before the meeting on Friday to Tasman District Council.
Does that give them adequate time, the TDC, to consider our conditions? I'm thinking, if they don't agree with them, I mean, at their meeting on Friday, is that adequate?
So through the chair, I mean, that will be part of what they will be considering on Friday. So they need to make the final decision around moving forward with this project. They will be made obviously aware that these are the conditions attached to our money, and that will be part of their decision whether or not they proceed.
Just, Mr Chair, through you, that we've spent a lot of time thinking of these conditions, And I would hope that councillors would get a copy of this letter too, by the way, I really would. But I think TDC, you know, it seems awfully short notice to send them something on the 30th, what is it now, the 27th, with several conditions that they may wish to challenge or may not be comfortable with, want to discuss in greater depth. I think it's a big ask, so in my view, to do it with such short notice for them.
So council would appreciate that there has been a negotiation process here in terms of what was acceptable to our council and acceptable to their officers, and I would presume that they have they had a workshop with their council last Thursday, I think, where I would imagine this was discussed. Yes, at the start of this, I indicated we had been in negotiations, so that these terms have been thrashed out between officers.
Thank you. Councillor Barker, then Councillor Fulton.
Thank you very much. Yes, I've got three questions. The first one is just a matter of making sure that we've got ourselves covered in terms of the words we've used, and I'm looking at the fourth bullet point in the recommendation. Nelson City Council or its successor will have ongoing rights to access 22,000 cubic metres of water a day from the aquifer. Shouldn't that have the words at no cost per cubic metre? Just to ensure that in the future no one pulls a shooty on us and says, okay, you can access it, but you've got to pay for it. I would like us to be covered. I'm happy to move
through the chair, I'm not clear what you mean at no cost, because I think we've highlighted in this report that there would be infrastructure investment required to access that water in the future.
I'm clearly just wanting to ensure that there is no cubic metre per cubic metre charge for that water. We don't get charged for each.
So we can't see what the government will do in the future in terms, I think it's highly unlikely that they'll ever start to allow anyone to charge for taking water, because then you start getting into the debate about who owns water. But that's one of the reasons, that's the advantage, that if you change to a shareholding, then you're being treated the same as any other shareholder. So if there was something in TDC's rules that allowed anyone who extracts water from an aquifer to pay a couple of cents per cubic metre for monitoring charges, then we would pay it too. But the advantage of taking the shareholding is we are treated the same as every other shareholder, and that's how we try to cover ourselves from any way of treating us differently from anyone else who takes water from the Waimea aquifer.
Okay, well, it would be nice to be 100% sure. The second question is the resolution in 2018 specifies that there will be a contract document and that will be signed at the time of the transfer. Can you estimate what date that's likely to be, when that's likely to be?
Ms Harrison can answer that one.
So through the chair, there will, so at this point in time, we've only really got time to form a letter, and that is legally binding. So the letter that will be going to TDC will, and eventually we will come back with, there will be a contract that will be signed by both parties, but really this is the legally binding part, is sending the letter. And as you'll be aware from the rest of the resolution, we do need to bring the engineering services agreement back as well next year to be approved by council. So there are other aspects of this. These are the pieces that needed to be confirmed by the 30th of November for the council, for TDC.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would feel much more confident or safer if I knew that a legal document sorted out by our lawyers was the one that was presented at that time to both parties.
Right.
Through the chair, that when we bring back the engineering services agreement next year, and obviously that's well before the funds will be passed over, there will be also a physical contract for that piece, and it'll be separate from the engineering services agreement because the engineering services agreement has a term on it, whereas the terms attached to our $5 million are effectively enduring.
Well, that can be, the final question is relative to section 3.3, and I just wonder, can someone tell me where the bill has got to going through Parliament? Has it had its second reading? How far through the process has that bill gone to? The Waimea Water Augmentation Scheme bill. Still confident it'll be passed by 15 December?
I don't know.
Through the chair, my information is that that's still the date that the TDC are expecting that bill to be passed.
Okay, Councillor Fulton.
Oh, yes.
We're on the second round now, so...
Thank you, through the chair. I just have probably 3 or 4 questions. Firstly, to me the recommendation isn't clear that, so basically what you've said is that once this recommendation passes, there's no opportunity for future councils to rescind this decision because the letter is legally binding. Should that have been made clearer in the recommendation, perhaps?
No, I think that if you've been here long enough to know that if you make a recommendation and this council makes a decision, it's a decision.
Yes, but we also generally know we can rescind a decision if we want to. So in this case, we're being told we cannot rescind this decision. Is that correct?
Correct.
That is correct. I just want to be really clear that this is, so because it's legally binding, there is no opportunity to rescind this decision or change our mind. My next question is around, Councillor Walker raised some questions around the model in terms of you're building a dam purely to replenish aquifers and that might not work. Officers convinced that that kind of science is robust and it is going to work because the science I've seen does not indicate so. Other officers convinced that this model of building a dam to replenish aquifers is sound science.
So we haven't dived deep into the into the project itself. Some of the stuff we have relied on Tasman District Council and the work they've done. I mean, they're proposing a $100 million project based on the science that this water will find its way into the aquifer. I find it just inconceivable that they would get this far in the process without being absolutely sure that that mechanism will work. And what's more, the Waimea aquifer must be one of the most well-studied, well-understood aquifers in New Zealand.
Your next question?
So Nelson City Council officers haven't turned their mind to whether this is sound science or not?
No.
No.
We haven't specifically turned our mind to the science, but I don't doubt the validity of the project. I have no reason to doubt the validity of the project.
Okay. My next question through the chair is when TDC became aware of the significantly higher costs, was there any conversation between TDC and NCC about potentially TDC urban supply being utilised more through the Maitai Dam? Has there been any subsequent conversations over how we could utilise the Maitai Dam to provide TDC with its urban supply of water? So kind of the opposite of what we're looking at now.
And that was the discussion I had with Tasman District Council, and I briefed the councillors on that. I told the media what I'd said. I think I wrote to Mr Cross saying what I'd said, and I think I copied councillors in as well.
I just want to refresh on it. Sorry.
So our projection was that yes, we could provide an extra 5,000. That assuming the Waimea Dam didn't go ahead, that the first thing we'd have to do is start supplying water to Nelson South, and then we estimated we could provide another 5,000 cubic metres a day to Richmond for about another 15 years, but that would require upgrading to our I mean, we could do that, provide some water to Richmond tomorrow if a calamity occurred, but it would put pressure on our treatment plant and on our reticulation. If we're going to do that as a planned measure, we would expect that upgrades to our treatment plant and our reticulation would happen. We estimate that could be, and I haven't got the letter in front of me, in the order of $15 to $20 million. My advice was we'd expect TDC to pay the lion's share of that, and they wouldn't get a refund when we started squeezing them out after 15 years. But the other kicker is that if TDC don't build the Waimea Dam and have to stop urban growth, then our growth rates would probably go up. And if our growth rates doubled, for example, that could see 15 years turn into 7.5 years. So yes, we can, but it's not a long-term solution.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Right.
Mr. Chair, would I be able to ask some questions, please?
Yes, I was going to leave you to the end, but if you want to come in now, Rachel, by all means.
Oh, no, I'm happy to wait to the end. I thought you might have been at the end.
No, I'm hoping to get there. Hopefully not too long. Councillor Dalberg. I've got you next.
Mr. Chair, I think Councillor Dalberg was giving me a first round before everybody else does a second round. I thought that was very kind of him.
I can't hear you.
I think Councillor Dalberg was handing to me because I haven't had first round and he was feeling that I should
we'll get into it.
Have a chance. Look, the only query I have is that the basis of the shareholding needs to be stipulated because I think most of the people around the table expected it to be a percentage of the amount given rather than the water take. And I think that in 2030 we'll all have forgotten this conversation and we'll have a letter. I think the letter, which is a binding contract or will become one, needs to be stipulated that it is linked to the extraction of the water and not the dollar value.
Ms Harrison, do you wish to comment on that?
Through the chair, if the council wish to do that, I may need to take an adjournment.
Well, I think it's essential that in 2030, most people expect a shareholding to be a monetary value comparison to rather than a water take. I think it's important that that is in there for the future.
Yes. Right, do council wish to have an adjournment so that that information can come back? Yes or no?
Yeah, but
yes.
Probably more questions might be asked.
Well, we'll come back to those, but we'll take how long do you need, Nikki? How much? 10 minutes? We'll take an adjournment.
I was just thinking there might be more questions that be answered during the adjournment as well.
No, we'll get this one out of the way first. No, Matt's next, but I just want to show the people are seated. Bill? Where's Nikki?
Hello.
Okay. Right, do you want to put this up first, please, Robin? And I'll read it to you. It's in that clause that says Nelson City Council or its successor has the right to convert the 5 million to shares in Waimea Water Limited no earlier than 2028, being 10 years after financial close for the Waimea Dam, and the number of shares representing the rights to take up to 22,000 cubes or in bracket a day, in brackets 515 hectares equivalent. Do you wish to make a comment?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, please. You're now getting into the realm of discussing terms, and the Chief Executive has given you very clear advice that if you wish to do that, you need to go into public excluded. I wish to have quite some discussion about what's there, and I'm not in a position to do that in public excluded because it goes to commercial terms.
Right. Well, this is actually an explanation, so I'm not. I wasn't too concerned about it.
Well, Mr. Chair, I need to ask some questions around commercial terms and what contractual terms, and I'm not in a position to do that in a public meeting. Which was the reason that this was. I'm very happy, as you know, and supportive of it being in public, but I was also on the proviso that the Chief Executive gave you at the start, that if you wish to discuss terms, you'll need to go into public excluded to do so.
Right, I fully understand that. But as I say, in this particular section, I believe it's an explanation. But I am conscious, I'm very conscious of what you're saying.
Yes, because, Mr. Chair, I've heard an explanation from the Chief Executive in relation to answering of questions that is different to what is on the screen, and I would need to discuss in confidential what the implications of that in terms of contract.
Ms. Harrison, do you wish to comment? Or Pat?
No, without knowing what the Mayor wants to discuss, no, I can't comment. But if you wish, as we indicated, if you wanted to get into the detail of negotiations, then it was going to be difficult to do that in a public meeting.
Okay, what we'll do, Your Worship, we'll just get through these questions in public, and then we'll come back to you and probably go into confidential to exercise what questions you've got. You all right with that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did make every endeavour to try and contact the officers during their adjournment, but after 6, 7, 8, 9 phone calls, I struggled to find somebody. And I do have some questions I'd like to ask in public.
Okay. I'll just get rid of, not rid of, but I'll invite the last 3 and then I'll bring you on if you're okay. Councillor Laurie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just sort of backing the truck up a little bit, I was thinking about Mr. Cross's, not that far, Mr. Cross's public forum presentation, and I'm wondering why haven't we been given the kind of graph that he was talking about, the kind of graph that shows actual water use, future water use, water availability, that sort of thing. Why haven't we seen that in this whole process?
I think, with all due respect, he really did back the truck up. In fact, he backed it into yesterday. That information is information for this, is not information required for this decision, and we've been through that. But Mr. Cross makes a reasonable point about a graphic, and I presume that's something that our officers will take on board. So do you want to go forward now?
Okay, I actually think that information would be useful for us making our decision today, but...
Okay, well, that's your opinion.
Okay, my next question is, and forgive me if this has been covered a bit, I don't think it's been gone into much detail, But would us taking a shareholding expose us to liabilities, including potential operating costs in the future?
Yes, I've already stated that if we take a shareholding, then we start to pick up, we will be responsible for our share of operating costs.
And so why would we take that chance?
Well, you don't have to, it's an option that the council has asked us to negotiate. So, that's something that would be considered at some time in the future as to just what, and Ms Harrison did comment that before you took that shareholding, the council would do due diligence on what risks and costs that would expose the council to.
Okay, so lots of members of the public would think at this point, dams are famous for going massively over budget. I think every dam that's been built in New Zealand has gone massively over budget. Dams overseas go massively over budget. With that knowledge, why would we expose ourselves to that potential liability?
Well, we haven't.
No.
We're providing a grant, and we can't take a shareholding for 10 years, by which time the dam will be built.
Okay. Right. Councillor Ackland.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just need some further clarification to understand the shift that's happening today compared to the position that we adopted and resolved on the 15th of May 2018. So, as at 15 May 2018, this council resolved that it agreed to allocate $5 million for the grant to the Waimea Dam project in 2021, subject to conditions. And the conditions of that grant at that point in time were that the parties, us and TDC, would both agree terms of contract, and they'd sign at the time of the transfer, assuring our ongoing rights to access 22,000 cubic metres of water a day from the Waimea aquifer, and that the contract would also allow for that grant to be transferred into a shareholding. And we'd do that, so the grant that we've decided was subject to those conditions. What I understand we're doing now, though, is we're not actually agreeing those conditions because we don't know what the shareholding is. We don't know what the shareholding agreement is. So we're not making that decision with open eyes about whether or not to make that grant, knowing the terms of agreement. We're just saying we're going to give you the grant and then we might agree those further terms later. I think the expectation of this council, certainly in my mind, was we'd only actually give that grant in the future once we know all those terms, once we know what it looks like, once we can go into it with open eyes and actually see whether or not it's worth us contributing that $5 million. So it feels like a very different proposition today if we're legally binding, signing ourselves up to $5 million, that we're doing that without any of the terms. Can I get some explanation on that?
So the main driver for this $5 million at the moment is a grant. But the council wanted, quite rightly, the option of being able to take water in response to that grant and also protect that investment by taking a shareholding. For us to get access to that shareholding agreement would be difficult at this stage, and what's more, would be a very minor player. I mean, for us to try and read that and then renegotiate it would just be next to impossible in terms of the timeframes that the Tasman District Council are facing. So this is a pragmatic solution to try and confirm our commitment so Tasman District Council can make a decision on Friday. We can't get you any more information, but be assured that if the council, and it's only an option, it doesn't have to take up the shareholding, but if the council wants to take the shareholding, that's the time when you can do the due diligence and decide, no, don't want to take the shareholding, happy to sit with the grant, thank you very much.
And just to cover that off, I spoke to you briefly in the break, Mr. Chief Executive, but I think it's useful to just get it on record, is I mean, when I read the resolution on the 15th of May, it just feels like a very big shift that we're doing today from what the 15th of May is. And 15 May, it isn't worded exclusively in that. It isn't saying those are the only terms of contract. It's just saying that the contract must include, in my reading of it, those two aspects. And there could be other terms involved with that as well, including something that I floated in the earlier discussions about a loan, for instance, it being couched in a completely different way that still gives us control over the $5 million grant, clawing it back, other options available. Now, do you read that differently to I do? That?
Well, can I ask you a question? You had a very fixed position last time we debated this issue. Are you now saying to us that you could change your position with regard to this if you had this additional information?
I can debate it with you, Mr. Chair, in the debate. I'm just wanting to get the information from the Chief.
No, that's a question to you.
Well, I just want to hear the answer to my question.
I'm just looking for a glimmer of light, that was all.
Well, I don't need to convince you. But what's the Chief Executive's?
So I'm expecting that there will be a contract where these are the terms, and no more, no less. I expect that there will be a large document around it, but at the end of the day, these will be the significant terms. And if there was anything in that agreement that moved away from the principle of those terms, then there would be another discussion with our council.
So I think, and I suppose it's TDC's risk then, isn't it? If they need to have signed off contracts going into signing off the deal on Friday, they need to be satisfied that the letter that you write is legally binding, whereas some people, myself included, may have the view that that's not legally binding on a future council because it's just an agreement to agree, which isn't legally binding.
Yes, well, we have had advice in other cases where the Chief Executive has written a letter and it has been legally binding.
Depends on the context.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can really answer your question anymore.
I think it is their risk. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, that is absolutely, if Tasman District Council wanted to introduce another term, then they would run the risk that we would say no. And that's the basis on which we negotiated those terms. Anything else they want to talk about, the supply of water to Nelson South, etc., sits outside this enduring agreement about the grant and our ability to convert it into a shareholding.
Thank you. Councillor Rutledge, and then we're going to the Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. Given that we are signing off a legally binding agreement, what opportunity for legal advice, and I guess particularly external legal advice from some of the firms that we retain, are you going to have the opportunity to take prior to getting this through?
Through the Chair, I will have an opportunity to run it past our legal advisors before Friday.
Our internal or the likes of DLA Piper or...
The lady that just came in the room.
DLA Piper.
Okay, so we are getting...
Oh, yes.
Belts and braces on it, that's great, thank you.
Your Worship.
And sorry, the final question on that. If DLA Piper raise any concerns with what we've done today, what is the mechanism for addressing those prior to Friday?
I don't know. I think you'll just have to play that one by ear. I mean, we're not expecting anything at this particular point that's concerned. I mean, advice has been given all the way through the process, sure. Mike.
But that's precisely why you get the legal opinion to check if there's anything you weren't quite expecting.
That's why we're being fairly cautious. Rachel, hello.
Hello, Mr. Chair, and thank you. Just a few questions, and hopefully Robin has sent me through the wording, which is, I think, may alleviate my need to go into public excluded subject to some questions I'm about to ask Nikki. So, through you, Mr. Chair, just a question for Ms. Harrison. Ms. Harrison, I think it might be useful for the councillors just to explain what financial close means. So, if you could just explain what all of the parties who have indicated that they wish to invest in this dam decision are currently doing, so that the council can understand that we are basically following a set pattern. Can you explain to them what financial close means?
So through the chair, there are a number of parties involved in the dam, as you're aware, and that effectively, contractually, they're lining up all the amounts so that they have surety around all the funding sources by a particular date. And that what they want to do. So contractually there's a whole lot of things, and I don't know the detail because I'm not party to all the detail of what all the condition precedents are, but there is a process that they're going through so that at a point in time they can all commit. There are portions that TDC will be underwriting, which is why they want our commitment documented and contracted, and effectively at that point in time all the funding is effectively committed and secured from the project's perspective. And then I think the idea is that the only one that would potentially still be outstanding at financial close is the water bill, which is expected on the 15th of December. So all those documents will be subject to that being passed.
All right, thank you. And look, I think I may recall picking up a newspaper story one day this week to indicate that Waimea Irrigators Limited have come through with their confirmation as well. Is that correct in terms of their contributions?
Through the chair, yes, that's my understanding.
All right, so we're essentially in a suite of parties who have indicated that they wish to invest in this dam or provide a contribution to this dam, and we're all going through the same process of now contractually confirming down to what we're doing. Just in terms of what we're doing, and I've listened to some of the questions around the table, which are interesting. Going back to the report, which I understand now is that the numbering's changed slightly, and it'll be at 5.1, where you set out the resolution from Council from the 15th of May meeting, where we agreed to make an allocation of $5 million for a grant, and then there was subject to some terms to allow officers the time to go and negotiate those terms. My understanding is that since we resolved that, and we needed to do that through the long-term plan, you have been negotiating those terms with Tasman District Council, and what you're coming back today to tell us is that you have managed to secure the terms as per the resolution of the 15th of May. And what you have in there is also picking up the second bullet point, which was to allow for the grant to be transferred to a shareholding. That is essentially what you've got today, and what you've put up on the screen is just clarification to link the water allocation of $22,000 to the conversion to the shareholding. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
All right, so we have no difference from what was resolved on the 15th of May until this date today in terms of the intent of council. Is that correct?
Through the chair, no. I mean, obviously, yeah, as you say, we indicated our desire for a shareholding, and there was also informal discussions around the desire for a joint director, and that is what we've brought back today.
All right, and so does that, but what I'm trying to establish is I'm hearing a series of questions around the table that sound as though councillors are concerned that since the 15th of May, officers have gone off to negotiate terms that are different to what council had resolved. And I just want clarification from you, because as I read it, you've done exactly what was asked. Is there anything at all there that would come as a great surprise to people sitting around the table?
Through the chair, no.
No. A few other questions just in relation to, thank you for raising the matter of the bill. Just coming back to Councillor McGurk's question around the Three Waters matter, and I'm not quite sure that that is the most relevant matter in relation to government's thinking. But whether the Chief Executive is able to remind me, have members of Parliament spoken, members of Cabinet in particular, spoken in support of the Waimea Dam? I'm trying to recall. I think there may have been some.
No, I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, I can't recall.
I did recall Mr Parker and Mr Jones being quite supportive, but perhaps a more I just want to check in relation to the indication of the different parties in relation to the local bill that is currently before Parliament. I think it's got its final reading to go. Which political parties have indicated support for that local bill?
Did you want to know, Rachel, did you want to know which political parties supported the Waimea Dam?
I wish to know, sorry, the phone's coming out slightly, but I wish to know which political parties have indicated support for the local bill.
I don't know. The only person that made any utterances in support was Shane Jones prior to the vote being taken, so I'm presuming, and it's dangerous with a politician, that his party will be supportive.
Mr. Chief Executive, it's fairly fundamental. Do you recall?
No, I'm sorry, Madam Mayor. I don't recall. I have not been following the progress of the bill.
Okay. Well, I could stand to be corrected, but just in terms of my thinking, I think you would find that the Labour Party are supporting, the New Zealand First are supporting, National are supporting, are indicating support. But there's one that I just want to check, and my understanding is that the Green Party are opposed to the bill. In other words, they will not support the bill going through, and without the bill going through, then the dam can't proceed. I'm just wondering if anyone, I believe that is the case, and there may be people around the council table who are able to tell me if I'm wrong. I think I'm right.
Anybody brave enough?
That is correct. I'm kind of wondering, though, Mr. Chairman, if you could ask the Mayor what the point of all of this is.
Well, no, you can ask the Mayor that.
Okay, well, through the Chair, to the Mayor, what is the point of all of this?
I've been listening to the questions from Councillor McGurk, and he was asking for the broader political context around this, given we're coming to the end of a process, and I'm just wanting to clarify in my own head what is the broader political context in terms of risk. And my understanding in terms of the steps that need to go are that financial close needs to be achieved, that all of the parties are now coming in to confirm the commitments that they had given. We being one, so we'd given a commitment, but we need to subject to conditions, and so we are now today looking to resolve that we have the conditions as we wished, and we're ready to do our final confirmation, which makes us contractually bound to this process. So are the other parties, and then the final piece of the mechanism is the local bill, and I'm just contemplating the risk around that of not going through, and my understanding is that the risk is quite low because the only party that opposed this going through or overtly is the Green Party, and no risks have come to me as Mayor around other parties changing their position. And I just know that you are well connected to parties, political parties in Wellington, so is Councillor McGurk. Others may well be, and if they felt there was some additional risk that we should be aware of at the table today, I'd just like to be made aware of that. Nobody's indicating there is any risk.
No. Everybody's got a smile on their face.
That's very good. Now, other sort of matters, I've just listened to the questioning, and I wonder if I've heard some questioning for Councillor Courtney was that a letter, he felt there may have already been a letter go to Tasman District Council, which would come as quite a surprise to me as Mayor. And I'm just wondering what that might have been about. And I wonder whether it may have been as in response to submissions to the long-term plan. And I'm just trying to recall whether Tasman District Council put in a submission to our long-term plan and whether they would have had a letter setting out what we resolved, which was the allocation of $5 million subject to terms. Is that possible? That they put in a submission and received a letter?
Ms McDonald, can you answer that?
Through the Chair, I'll just have to check what came in and what we might have responded with, but I can do that quickly.
Okay, we're just going to check that one out.
Thank you. Because I certainly know, because we've been subject to negotiations all the way through this, just to get the last part through, and then it's here today. In terms of this issue that I can hear councillors having some concern around in relation to a decision today and not having the weight that it needs to be contractually binding. I'm surprised about that, given the number of matters that council contracts on a regular basis and tenders and all sorts of things that cross the term of council. I'm just trying to think whether, in terms of transacting a $1.4 billion business, how you would proceed in relation to all sorts of contracts that we enter into if you could have flip-flops around decisions. And just for the Chief Executive, I've heard the Chief Executive say a letter with his signature on it holds considerable weight in terms of contract. Just for the Chief Executive, I would have thought that a letter with your signature on it that was also supported by a resolution of council in a public meeting might carry a considerable amount of weight and be a very clear binding contract between parties. Would that be correct?
That would be correct, and that's where we would get the legal advice to make sure that we were using the right wording to make that clear.
All right. So Mr. Chief Executive, Pat, do you feel that in relation to making sure you have the right wording, do you feel that needs to go to what is resolved by council today? So my question, and this follows up on Councillor Rutledge's questions. Would it be prudent to have a legal review of the resolution, especially given there's been an amendment to it, to what was to the recommendation? There's been a change to the wording.
Look, I see this as a commitment. You know, you're authorising the CE to write to Tasman District Council confirming the following: Nelson City Council contribution is $5 million. It will be made on 1 July 2020. That resolution, combined with me writing to Tasman District Council confirming that commitment, I think will be a significant, will be a commitment, no doubt about it. And look, my understanding is that the other parties to this financial close are also entering into similar terms of agreement because of the time pressures, and will eventually sign contracts as well. But this is the process that Tasman District Council are following, and are comfortable that that gives them the certainty they need to proceed. It was them that proposed this method of progressing. They're the ones that seek the certainty that they're comfortable with the process we're following.
All right, thank you, Pat. I don't think it gets any clearer than that. As from what I can see, we're at we resolved on the 15th of May to make the allocation subject to terms. The officers have subsequently gone to negotiate the terms that we requested. Tasman District Council are approaching financial close and calling on all the parties now to give the confirmation and ready for the formation of the contract. We're being asked today to confirm, yes, officers, you have undertaken the work that we asked you to do. You have done that satisfactorily, and we are ready for financial close. I cannot see any risks to the final step at this stage, given the commitment from all of the political parties, apart from the Green Party, which opposed the Waimea Dam bill, and potentially a broader suite of issues in relation to the Waimea Dam. And I think this is following what I would consider as me to be a good practice in terms of the way we conduct business. Councils are regularly bound into long-term decisions from previous councils, and there would be no other way to proceed with major infrastructure projects if we did not do that, whether they were NZTA projects, whether they were tenders that we enter into that cross terms of council. That's the process that we work through. I'm satisfied that this meets the intent around why we were making the contribution, and as long as standing orders allow me to do so, Mr. Chair, and Robin can probably confirm that, I'm happy to move with the red words that you've got there, because they are exactly what was asked for and exactly what I understood was being negotiated.
Thank you. You're moving that amendment?
I'm moving the
entire report?
Yes, the entire, as it stands, with the red words as I've read.
Okay. It's been seconded by Councillor Noonan. It is now available for debate. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor there.
Thank you for that.
Deputy Mayor, take it as a compliment. Just highlighting, we have got a hearing panel at 1 o'clock. How's that work? That can be pushed out?
We'll just check on. I think we can. Yeah. You're deliberating, aren't you?
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers. Hey, no, thank you. I thank the CEO and staff for the ongoing negotiations with TDC, and I thank the CEO for stating position where we were, what we'd offered, and what is still on the table. Nothing different. My reply as a councillor to this is, I don't think the TDC appreciated this as a gift. They probably thought it was more of an investment. But I'm also a bit disappointed TDC were cheeky buggers to ask for an increase in Christmas gift voucher to them. This was a grant and a gift that we'd offered, and for them to come back and say, can you give us more, is just a bit tight. And it must be remembered, this is money out of our ratepayers for their project, not our project and not for our water supply. But saying that, I'm still puzzled why, after we've gifted them a gift from our ratepayers, why we have to once again write another letter to sort of put their minds at ease. I can see it's sort of dotting some of the I's and crossing some of the T's, but to be honest, it almost wavers me not to support this particular recommendation. But I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any further speakers? We've all awakened up. Councillor Fulton.
Mr. Chair, I will exercise my right to reply when we get to it, and I'll be calling for a division.
I haven't forgotten you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Look, I hadn't expected this to come back again to the table, and I understand that there's already been a decision made by the council to take this direction, and I was a minority voice in that decision-making process. But I would just like to reiterate that when the costs went up as high as they did, I would have liked to have seen a greater conversation between TDC and Nelson City Council over the ability to utilise the Mai Tai to look at the pre-treatment plant investment and investing our money into the existing infrastructure and providing TDC with an opportunity to connect its urban water supply to this to the Mai Tai Dam, which already exists. I appreciate that in terms of long-term planning there might have been concerns that there was not enough water available. However, I think as a country and as a region we really need to consider how we use our water, what steps we're taking to decrease the amount of water we use. In other parts of the world, every single new house that is built will have a rainwater tank. All grey water and black water is treated and then used as irrigation on the land. So currently, as a region, we do not utilise the water that we already have very well. I'm also continue to be concerned that the entire model in terms of building a dam to replenish an aquifer is flawed in terms of the science. Councillor Walker raised some concerns around that, and to spend that much money investing in a system which may not work, to me you go back to the drawing board. Further, in terms of looking at agriculture on the Waimea Plains, there's a new movement in regenerative agriculture which looks at water retention in terms of watering the land a lot less, retaining the water on the land, looking at creating microclimates, and that is a worldwide movement which it's very new science and it's quite exciting science, and so we should have been considering that opportunity as well. So because of that, my biggest concern is that it is such a lot of money for a very small number of people, and that crippling impact of that large amount of debt on our region really concerns me, and that's why I can't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Dalby.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, to me, this has always been about risk management and future water security for the region, not just Nelson. I'm pleased that we are actually confirming up our original discussion with TDC, because they need that to get their negotiations completed. The only bit I'm struggling with here really is the end result. We've got a right to go and excess 22,000 compared to item 4.4. It mentions purchases amount of water if we don't actually do that. So I'd like that a bit more tidied up, but other than that I am comfortable with this, and I think it's a good move for future water security. If we think something happens to the dam, we think the growth projections end up not out there but in our area, this is the amount of money. Yes, it's large, but in risk management it's actually, in my opinion, well worth the effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Noonan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Today is to confirm what we decided in our long-term plan to allocate the $5 million. It's required by TDC to give them certainty so that they can get the balance of their funding. It's important that we support this to allow them to do that. It also gives us an opportunity today to clarify the issues that we have debated this morning and questioned on regarding the shareholding and regarding the appointment of director. So it's further into the future for those two things, but today all we're being asked is to confirm our intention of our allocation of $5 million, so I support it.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I was around when the same sort of situation we're in now was occurring pre-1984, when there was a concern, will there be a Maitai Dam or not? And I just hate to think what the situation would be now if that dam had never been built. We would have been in huge problems. The cost of a project is never cheaper than it is today. Delays always add costs and cost you into the future. This is going to be a further risk avoidance thing by having us a guaranteed supply if we need it. There's extra $22,000, which we only agree to by contract after 10 years. And the other thing I like about this water is because staff and some councils have been involved in the Water Augmentation Committee since about the year 2000, it's very clear that the questions earlier about will this work, will the aquifer work? Of course it will work. It has worked and it will continue to work. So that is very good water that comes out of that too, because it doesn't need treatment like our water does. So all in all, this is a guarantee for the future for our citizens. No matter what structure the local government does in the future, it's the right decision to make, just as it was in 1984.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
So, sorry, Luke. He looked at me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to vote against this. And for me, you know, the fact that at the start of today's meeting, we heard from Mr. Steve Cross, someone who probably knows more about all of this about the dam than all of us put together. And he highlighted the fact that we have still not been given information that actually shows us on a graph what our water usage is, what our future water usage is going to be, and what our water supply is. And for me, for us not to have that information just kind of beggars belief. The other thing that sort of bothers me is that this is being now sort of framed as an economic development step that Nelson's taking. Yet I don't remember us ever having a conversation around this table about what else we could do with $5 million. And I struggle to be able to support this when we haven't had that discussion, if this is about economic development. So yeah, I'm disappointed we didn't have that talk, and I think the jury is actually out on the environmental impacts of the dam, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens.
Thank you very much. Right of reply, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank the officers for having undertaken the negotiation steps as directed by Council from our LTP discussions. They have fulfilled the request of this Council as resolved on that date. They've come back with a very clear set of terms that have been negotiated, securing that access to 22,000 cubic metres per day of water from this development. We have balanced, in my view, appropriately the future debt level for Nelson City Council alongside regional cooperation, resiliency and opportunity for economic development. I hear the comments around the ability to engage in discussion on economic development. I cannot think of a project that has come to the table more times in my many terms on council now than this one. As Councillor Barker said, we have had representatives involved in the Waimea Dam committees, whatever their names were, throughout the different decades. We have had multiple reports on the economic value or otherwise of the dam, and we have commissioned them jointly with Tasman District Council through the Regional Development Agency, directly through Nelson City Council. They have been reported to Council, they have been put to the table, and any elected member of Council has had multiple opportunities to have a broader discussion around economic development in relation to water security or where funds are invested. So I don't think that argument holds water. I would just like to say I'm very pleased this matter has been dealt with in public today. There has been an enormous amount of scuttlebutt and speculation going on around different parties' actions in relation to the dam. Ours have always been very, very clear. They have been clear that we will make a $5 million contribution. I don't have any problem with Tasman District Council coming back to ask the question, could we put more in? The answer to that, I think, has been is we feel comfortable with $5 million. We consider that to be a reasonable contribution for the allocation that we're getting, but I think it is perfectly reasonable always to ask, and we've just been very clear with our answer. We've been very clear all the way through, and I think we leave the community in no doubt as to our decision-making process, the reasons why we're making this contribution, and the certainty that Nelson City Council has into what it's receiving for that contribution, which is the ability to access a significant volume of water, and if it chooses in future years to convert a grant into a shareholding. So I just want to thank the officers, and as I said, I am calling for a division in relation to this decision.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Division is called. Well, you had to say it. Where you go.
Councillor Ackland.
No.
Councillor Barker.
Aye.
Councillor Courtney.
Aye.
Councillor Delberg.
Aye.
Councillor Fulton.
No.
Councillor Laurie.
No.
Councillor McGurk.
Aye.
Councillor Matheson.
Aye.
Councillor Noonan. Councillor Rutledge.
Aye.
Councillor Skinner.
No.
Councillor Walker.
No.
The Mayor.
Aye.
The ayes are 8, the noes are 5. The ayes carry. I now declare the meeting closed and invite you to have a very quick lunch, and then the community services will reconvene. Thank you very much for your help.
We'll reconvene at 1:30.
1:30?
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Your Worship.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.